Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico Borrego.
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast that is back from the dead. Now, this week, we are continuing on with this month's Album for Album episode. Tony, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone what album we're talking about today?
The album we are talking about is Shangri-La Dee from Stone Temple Pilots. And let me just get right into this. This is probably my favorite album. And I understand that favorite may not necessarily be what I think is the greatest album of all time. But this album is very personal to me. I heard it when I was, I believe it was either middle school or early high school, around that time. And you know how those time periods are very, what do you call it? Very important years that really stick with you.
The formative years of your life.
There we go. That's the word. And so I just wanted to pass on that love of the album to someone. And what a better opportunity than album for album. Now, Rico, what is your background with STP?
I didn't really know many of their songs until you started listening to them back when you did. And, I only probably knew like the singles like Plush and Creep. And then once you started listening to them, I knew some of the other singles like Interstate Love Song, Dead and Bloated. And I remember you trying to play me some of their stuff when we were younger, when I was getting into Pearl Jam, since they're all kind of around that same time period. And I think we just both, like, I thought Pearl Jam was better. You thought STP was better. So I think that's kind of, always been where we were at. But over the years, going back and listening to some of their other songs, I did appreciate them more than I realized. And going into this album, I did know Days of the Week, the song, the single from this album. And I'll share my thoughts about that in a second. But not a band I know many songs besides the hit before this, besides the singles before this album. But now have a whole album of theirs down, and I have some thoughts.
Oh, do you? Okay, well, let's just go right off the bat. When you heard this album, what, you obviously you go with some sort of expectation based off like the singles you've heard of the band and whatnot. I know some people, when they think of STP, they think of like Plush, where he's singing with that big meaty voice and everything. And to me, that's not the STP I love. And so did you kind of go in with the shock when you kind of heard how this album plays out?
It wasn't, I wasn't really a shock because like I kind of knew the year when this album came out, like I knew that much. And I think you had told me it was like the last album before they first kind of broke up. So like I already knew it wasn't going to be as like grungy as probably their like debut album and their first couple albums. So I wasn't as like surprised, but on first listen, I guess I was a little surprised in the sense that like I didn't enjoy it on my first listen as much as I thought I was going to, because like leading up to it, knowing Days of the Week, I love Days of the Week, and I'll just get this out in the open right now. Best song on the album for me. And I'm going to say by a lot, but it's not to like put down the other songs. I just think like this song is one of their best songs. It's for me a toss up. Knowing the few songs of theirs that I know, it's a toss up of this Days of the Week and Interstate Love Song as being my two favorites from the band. And I knew going into it that the album wouldn't have like that sound of Days of the Week, because I feel like it's a little bit more of a catchier, poppier song than I feel like any of their other songs. So, but on first listen to the album, not a lot of the songs stuck with me like I thought they were going to. So I was a little surprised in that sense, and I was a little disappointed and a little afraid, because I thought, oh, like, is this going to be the first album Tony kind of gives me that like I can't really attach to? But I'm like, I'm not going to make any, statements or, make up my mind until I hear it, at least the 3 times. And I ended up listening to it probably like 6, 7 times. And thankfully, the more I listened to it, a lot more of the songs stuck with me. Not every song, but I would say like they did really grow on me. And then the more I listened to it, the more like I kind of got familiarized with the songs, the more they kind of stuck in my head. The songs that were catchy were like starting to really, grab me. The songs that I thought were creative, really the little, parts in the song really started to stand out to me. So I ended up liking the album way better on like even on my second listen, but even more so my third and fourth listen than I did my first listen.
Well, that's great to hear. So what would you say was the song that grew on you the most? Because that sounds like this album really did take a little bit to warm up to. So which was a song that you thought was a total zero, throwaway, filler that you ended up actually like, getting excited for when it came up on the album?
Okay, I have an answer for this one. I won't say on first listen I thought it was a zero, but I did think filler a little bit. And I usually don't like to think of that word when I listen to music because, or like the nowadays people use the word mid for filler. Um, but on first listen to Too Cool Queenie, I was like, this one I couldn't really remember it when I like first heard it the first couple times. But something, especially this last week when I was giving it, a couple more listens before recording this episode today, it really started to like stick in my ear. And like every time it would come on listening to the album, I was like, oh yeah, here's that opening, like kind of chord progression riff. Especially love the cowbell in it. And then like the lyrics in that one stuck out to me more than some of the others. And I just liked kind of the groove of the song and the structure. It's kind of an interesting structure. It ends way before you think it's going to end. Like I think it even ends maybe on a verse. Like every time it ends, I'm like not expecting it to end right there, which I think is kind of cool. Um, and there's just a lot of little things about it I really like. I think the bass on that song, on the whole album, well, I'll get to that in a minute. It really drives the song. The Scott Weiland's opening vocals really reminded me of Elliott Smith for some reason. Like the delivery and the tone of his voice.
Oh,
Like
really?
yeah, like if I could imagine Elliott Smith singing like a little bit more of an upbeat rock song, it just his voice sounded like I don't know, like I just heard it and I was just like that sounds like Elliott Smith to me. And
Holy
I don't know.
cow. You're kind of right.
Yeah, and it's just really not,
Whoa.
I don't know. It's on the first verse because the end vocals he kind of switches the way he sings the ending vocals like on the last verse. And the ending vocals, I think, are even stronger than the beginning vocals. So on the ending vocals, I really don't hear as much Elliott Smith, but for some reason, the like first verse really sounds like Elliott Smith to me. Maybe just like his phrasing and just kind of the tone. I think Scott's voice, he has a little bit of a nasal, kind of thing going on that sometimes I like and then sometimes I don't. But like on this song, I think it fits. But yeah, that was a song that grew on me for sure the most. Like I didn't hate it definitely for sure on first listen, but I did think of it as kind of filler. And then like now I'm like, oh, it's one of the more standout tracks.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. I think it's a really nice kind of uh, a breath of fresh air near the end. Because it's kind of a little bit of a shorter song, kind of like the days of the week of the second half of the album. And something that you mentioned that I thought that I always admired about this album is you were saying how the last verse he sounds different than the first verse. One of Scott's greatest abilities is to kind of be a vocal chameleon. I feel like he's not always singing as characters necessarily, but he's always singing different. And I feel most of the time he makes it work. Even, some of the later tracks where not in this album, but in his career, where he went more the Bowie route. But, even kind of dialing it in more, on the majority of these songs, if there's like a chorus or whatever, he usually sings it, like it's not necessarily, the same take, copy, and pasted sometimes, like you can tell there actually is of like dynamics in the performance, and it feels kind of like a rock band in that way. Do you know what I'm kind of getting at there?
Yeah. Yeah. That his personality, I think, can drive the song. And when he's like, I think when he's at his best, he's really good. And I know there's times where he's not at his best. I know that's kind of something he's struggled with throughout their career. I did watch some live performances, and like some were way better than others. But
Hmm.
it's kind of that rawness that, yeah, that does kind of leave a lasting impression on you that I enjoyed throughout these songs. And that song, Too Cool Queenie, I think was again one of the better vocal or better lyrics on the album. I kind of thought it was like a better version of Hollywood Bitch, which is a song that I didn't care for too much. And it's one that I thought would grow on me more as the song went on. But the sound of it was just like musically, it was just a little too generic for me. Like there was nothing that was like super impressive. I think at first the hand clap percussion I thought was like, I'm like, okay, that's an interesting production choice. Um, and I thought the chorus was mostly catchy, especially like the line, she's so fake, she seems real. Um, and the drums kind of changing during the chorus, I thought was a good decision. But like, yeah, the lyrics were more like in Hollywood Bitch, the lyrics were a little bit more off-putting than for sure, and more so than like Too Cool Queen. I thought the lyrics on that song was way better version of Hollywood Bitch.
No, totally fair. I do agree that at least for me, Hollywood Bitch is kind of the most filler, I would say. Now, I don't think it's a bad song by any means. Um, but their previous album, number 4, had a song that was kind of similar with kind of the main riff called Heaven and Hot Rods. So this kind of feels like a lesser version of it. But kind of just thinking about it, that main verse part with kind of like that walking up and down riff with like the kind of the voice he sings in, could kind of be like a Queens of the Stone Age sort of thing, especially with that lead guitar doing the Werner Werner, throughout, kind of goofy.
But maybe
And
more like early Queens of the Stone Age, because like my problem with Queens of the Stone Age, and I'm sure we'll have an episode on one of their albums or on just on them on in general, but like their first album, I just think it's like nothing special. Like, yeah, it's better than like current pop music, and I'm one day I'll probably get it on vinyl and whatnot, but I just those songs don't connect with me and they don't stay in my brain, and that's kind of what Hollywood Bitch is to me. Like it's just like even right now I'm having a hard time thinking of how it goes. I'm having to check my notes on this one, where on most of the other songs I almost probably didn't need notes because there were things about them that were so vivid, either in a good way or in a bad way. So yeah, that's my only thing. Like but I see what you're saying. Like there is a comparison to be made.
and
Um,
actually, I think there's one more song on the album that also kind of sounds like Queens of the Stone Age to me. And I think it's a song that I think it's going to be your least favorite on the album. Um, but I could be wrong. Do you know what song I'm talking about?
is it the closing track?
Yes, Long Way Home. How
Yeah,
do you
my least
feel?
favorite. My least favorite.
What about the solo at the end? That solo is sick. One of the best solos on the album.
You know what you know what I put in my notes? It's the very last sentence. In my whole notes because it's the last song on the album. My very last sentence was "Solo doesn't save it." But in that sense, I'm saying like the solo was good, but like not good enough for me to be like, okay, yeah, at least that like because for sure, like the guitar work on this album is great.
It's
Um,
kind of like a sorry to kind of bounce around, but I have to say this. I've been waiting weeks to tell you this. With the guitar work in particular, this is STP's Stadium Arcadium.
well, let me ask a question really quick because I usually do more background on the band and album, and this album doesn't have a lot of background, at least not on like Wikipedia. Like this album is just I don't know. There's not a lot of info about it online. But I should have done background on the band. I know there's brothers in the band, but are there two guitarists?
There's only one guitarist, Dean DeLeo, and the
Okay,
brother, Robert DeLeo,
is the bass
absolute
player.
monster on bass. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So then, in that sense, then yeah, I totally agree with you because throughout this album, not knowing if there was two guitar players, I kind of thought there were two guitar players. And like on the Red Hot Chili Peppers album, Stadium Arcadium, it sounds like there's like four guitar players at during certain songs because sometimes there's so many guitar layers throughout each song. So I definitely agree in that sense. And there's a lot of different sounds too. Like you have, the chugging kind of distorted rock sound on songs like Dumb Love and Coma. And then you have like really delicate, sounds like acoustic, like on Wonderful and on A Song for Sleeping and Bipolar Bear. And then you have like, some kind of out there sounds like there's almost, is it like it sounds like there's like a sitar sound on the song Transmissions from a Lonely Room.
Yes, I believe that actually is. This album definitely does have like I know they use an auto harp and a banjo in Bipolar Bear. There definitely is some cool creative choices like that.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of guitar textures throughout the album, kind of like Stadium. And Stadium's my favorite Chili Peppers album. So, um, but yeah, I mean, it's impressive all the sounds he gets because I'm I've never Scott doesn't he never played guitar, right? Or at least not on these albums or songs.
No, just kind of like a typical singer that can play a little guitar, but not
Yeah.
not in STP.
So
I think
I
he does use the keyboards though on Wonderful, I believe.
so then it does, and now it kind of makes sense because we were talking about this earlier. The fact that this album didn't get a ton of attention, the song "Days of the Week" was like a decent performing single, but they didn't play a lot of these songs live, and it was right before they broke up, so that's probably another reason. But excuse me, I'm wondering now if the reason they didn't play these songs live is because when they toured, do you know if they had like another guitarist? Because I feel like for a lot of these songs, they would feel a little empty if it's just one guitarist only.
To my knowledge, I've never seen them have another guitarist. I mean, they're definitely really good at sounding huge, at being musically a trio, you would say. And I've actually seen them go out of their way to their bass player will play acoustic sometimes because he actually writes, about half the songs, if not more. So they'll have like an acoustic attached to his microphone, and so he'll play the acoustic, and then when the song kicks in, he'll jump on bass for it. But no, they really managed just really keeping that simple rock format, which I think is really cool. They really transcend the rock genre, in my opinion, but they do kind of work within those boundaries.
Yeah, so I I totally agree that the guitar sound is great throughout the album. And then the
Great
one thing I want to mention,
chords.
if we're talking about the album just as a whole, is I think the thing that I took away most from this album, besides maybe having definitely more of appreciation for Scott's vocals, and I keep calling him Scott because I always mispronounce his last name, so I just tend to call him Scott. Um, but was the bass playing. The bass playing on this album was, and I wasn't so surprised because I always knew you would always say to me like, oh yeah, their bassist is definitely like probably one of the most underrated. And I just from this album alone, I would agree. Like, there's pretty much every song there was some great thing going on with the bass. Some like the ending of Bipolar Bear I think has some of the best bass on the album, and then like songs like that I didn't like as much, like Transmissions from a Lonely Room or um Hollywood Bitch. Like the bass does kind of save it a little bit. But yeah, there's
Whoa, whoa!
wonderful bass moments. But
You're not a fan of Transmissions?
no, that it's a better song to me than Hollywood Bitch. But okay, so there's three songs. Well, so this album, there's some like I told you it grew on me, but there's some that didn't. One that didn't grow on me was Hollywood Bitch. The other one was Long Way Home. Transmissions grew on me a little bit more, but to me, it's kind of like Dumb Love. It's kind of forgettable, and so I'm gonna just say now
Whoa,
too.
whoa!
Dumb Love, I think, is not a good way to start the album. I think it's a sleeper song, and it shouldn't be because it's like rock, but it begins the album with like this. It begins the album the way that 15-year-old me would have thought the typical STP song would sound like, which is like just kind of a little generic, like not like rock enough to like go whoa, but not like alternative enough to go whoa. And
Bro, are you kidding me right now? It's
yeah,
such a rocker.
and he's doing that thing with his voice where it's like a little too whiny for me, but then it sounds like he's using that megaphone thing, which I know he does live on songs like Dead and Bloated. That I'm not a huge fan of. Like, and I don't really like it when anyone does it. Like Bono's done it before in a couple songs. Michael Stipe did it like on Orange Crush, and it just never sounds as good as I think they think it does.
May I suggest a different perspective here? Now this statement is extra true in my opinion for the tiny music record they released. But don't you think that those kind of the kind of the screams in Dumb Love, can't you hear a little bit of Chester Bennington kind of in that a little bit? Which I know you like Chester.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like my favorite vocals from Scott are actually his more subdued vocals. Like, and we'll get to him here, but like
I do
his
agree.
vocals, the opening vocals on the song "Wonderful" and on the song "Bipolar Bear," and the whole song of "A Song for Sleeping" are fantastic. And then when he does go a little bit more rock, I prefer like "Days of the Week," where it's like really catchy melody, and like he's always a little bit more like he's kind of pulling it back on the verses, and then on the choruses he kind of lets it out a little bit where you're like, oh, that, like if I tried singing that in the chorus I would not be able to hit those notes, but he does it effortlessly. But I don't know, like on like Dumb Love or even Coma, like the screams, like it took me a while for me to kind of like get used to it. Like I just wasn't a fan a lot as much at first.
Really?
Yeah, and
Wow.
Dumb Love was just, yeah, that song was like the lyrics were kind of like, okay, it sounds like it's about like an addiction, but it's like a little too vague.
I
Though,
think the
and then
first lyrics are great.
I like Dumb Love in the fact that it's a short song, and sometimes I do like a shorter song to open an album than a long song. And then they did the best thing they could, which was followed it up with the best song on the album with Days of the Week. But the first half of the album, I this is actually one of the albums where I almost think it's backloaded, even though Days of the Week is my favorite. Dumb Love as an opening, not one of my favorites. Days of the Week is fantastic. It's my favorite. Coma was one that really had to grow on me. Coma was not one I liked at first. Hollywood
That's
Bitch,
their underrated rocker. That's the one that I think
it's
should
a
be
better
held up,
rock.
you know.
It's out of like the rockers on this album, it's probably one of the best ones, because then after that one, you got Hollywood Bitch, which we've already talked about. I'm not the biggest fan. Then you get Wonderful, which is like the first ballad on the album, and there are a good amount of like kind of ballad songs on the album. And I like this one a lot on first listens, but on repeated listens, I didn't like the chorus as much. And we'll get kind of more back to Wonderful in a minute. But
So
then
is
once you get to Black Again, then I feel like you go on a three song run that's fantastic. Black Again, Hello It's Late, Too Cool Queenie. It dips a little with Regeneration to me. Not we'll get to that one too in a minute. That one I'm kind of iffy on.
you have
Then
a
you get
lot of thoughts
Bipolar.
for these. You
You
want to
get
tussle
Bipolar Bear,
here?
which I think is great. And then you like kind of dip again with Transmissions, but then A Song for Sleeping is one of my favorites. And then you end it with, lately you've been giving me Adam, like the last three albums you've given me, I've just not loved the closing songs. Funny enough.
Yeah,
Uh,
Maggie McGill is not a good closer. I will be with you for that. I think Long Way Home, I understand not being your favorite. I'm not surprised at all. And for me, it's definitely one of the bottom tracks.
I like the very, like when it first comes in, and he's like the getaway part when he's like yelling at, that's kind of cool. But I've kind of decided recently that I like an album to either end with like an upbeat rock song, like an epic song, a longer song, a song that like, has different tempo changes or whatever, something like really cool like that. Or just to play it simple and end with a ballad, which I think is like you take a less of a risk that way. But if you end with like a decent ballad, or not even a ballad, but like a slower, somber song, that's fine. But I don't like the ones that are in the middle. Like I feel like Long Way Home is in the middle. Like it rocks, but it's a slow rocker, and I don't like ending an album with a slow rocker.
Okay, that's a fair statement. This is a fair statement.
And like, yeah, the chorus is cool. Like again, the bass on the chorus is, you know, I think pretty great. But and I give it props for it not being a ballad to close the album. But yeah, and it has that more grunge sound. So maybe wouldn't be a fan of like their more grunge sound on their first couple albums.
I will say, their first album I don't really care about. I mean, I enjoy the songs, but for me, just their second record, Purple, is already much better. But for me, it's like I really like the run of Tiny Music to Shangri-La Dee. Like I think that's when the band was the most creative and more in the alternative category. Um, but I do understand what you're saying, that the kind of grungier, heavier songs just aren't probably what you prefer from the band. So that makes sense that Dumb Love, Long Way Home, and Hollywood Bitch are kind of like your least favorite. That definitely makes sense. I'm a little shocked though that Coma took a while for you, because I think Coma's a great song. It's even got a cool little like sound effect loop.
I'll
Uh,
tell you my first thought when I heard it. When the song first started, first of all, it's coming after Days of the Week, so I'm like kind of pumped up again. I'm like, okay, yeah, like Days of the Week is a bop. It's great. And then it comes in with like scratching like DJ guitar noise, and I'm like, is this Corn? Is this Rob Zombie? I'm like, what is this? Like, it was like, and for those listeners, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Corn or Rob Zombie, which is why I made those comparisons. But
hey, they're pretty sick though for what they are.
when the song kind of gets going, like when it gets to the part where there's actually like he hit the scratching part and then the vocals and then like the riff comes in, I'm like, that's cool. And then, you know, I like some of the lines. I like the line a lot where he sings "Your high road is overrated." I like the way he sings it. And the chorus is catchy, and it got easier on the ears the more I listened to it. And that little drum part that comes after the chorus, where it's like really like gated and like I don't know, like the production on it is really cool. It's been done before, but it was cool. And then really my favorite part was the most interesting part to me was the bridge with like that
Love the bridge.
hypnotizing bass line, the kind of atmospheric noises.
Jangly
The,
guitar.
and then the solo too after it is great. So there's a lot of good things about Coma, but that initial like noisy part, it took a while for it to grow on me.
Okay, it is a little bit abrasive. Kind of a quick fun fact about Coma. You're mentioning the drums and the production with it. Yeah, even though this album isn't it does suffer from the loudness wars. Something cool about that is that they originally had the drums be like normal drums, but they said it sounded too cheesy, so they actually recorded it with a smaller size drum kit. And I just thought that was super cool. You know, just changing the drum kit because it sounded too cheesy, being like a big rock song.
Well, yeah, and
Um,
let's really quick while we're on the topic of production, let me take a moment to say I was a little shocked when I did do the background research on this album to find that Brendan O'Brien, our good old friend Brendan O'Brien, produced this album. Not surprised because, he's produced, Pearl Jam and other grunge bands from that, time era and, you know,
Light
but
grenades, which went over.
yeah, and I have it I like his approach. I just don't like the way some of the like I like the choices but not the execution, I will say. On a lot of things. So the reason I was shocked when I read it because I was like, wow, that bass is so good on this album. Brendan O'Brien really produced this album. And I think it's just a me thing because I think when people talk about Brendan O'Brien and they think that sometimes he just makes everything sound a little like softer than it could. And for me, that's specifically with the bass. I just think the bass sound like on Pearl Jam albums that he's produced just does not sound loud enough on
Totally agree with you.
on a lot of songs. There's some songs where it sounds great, like Present Tense or whatever, but yeah, the bass sounds great on this album. That said, there were some production choices I really liked. Um, like on a song like Black Again, some parts of Wonderful, almost the whole song of A Song for Sleep, and I like the production choices. One I didn't really love, and we can just talk about the song now if you want, was I wish the chorus of Bipolar Bear was mixed a little different because the beginning of the song and the verse is so great that, so I'm letting you go again. Great one liner to open a song. You know me by now. I love a good, like, not only a good opening line to begin a song, but a good opening melody. And this song hits all those, checks all those boxes for me. Acoustic guitar is great. The chords they picked are fantastic. And then the chorus is a little bigger than I was expecting it to be, but I just wish the vocals were clearer. They're like there's too many like effects on them, or they're a little too buried for me to really appreciate them. And I think the drums are just a little too distracting. Um, I will say the riff during the chorus is great, but like the drums and the vocals I didn't love on the chorus of Bipolar Bear.
Okay, you know what? I actually do kind of agree with you. And the reason, okay, I think I understand why the band mixed it the way they did, though. The song, hence the title and the funny bipolar bear. The song is about his struggle with bipolar disorder, and I think the idea, was to make the chorus could be kind of that real manic, out of control type of sound. Um, Now, something on the flip side though is that there's a vocal only track that is released, and a guitar only track as well. And listening to those in isolation really makes you appreciate the chorus more. Um, a really phenomenal performance from Scott. A really, really great layering from Dean. Um, but yeah, I do agree, and I know some people have said the album's overproduced, and I never fully really know what that means. But I do think that the production of this album did allow for those creative ideas and decisions to happen. But like we're kind of saying, the execution, like you said, is kind of comes a little short in some moments. And I do think that maybe it could have came out a little better in this chorus, but I just love the song so much. It's hard to kind of imagine it being better. But do you like the way it's mixed at the ending? Because I think the really pretty atmospheric ending is mixed very well.
No, yeah, like I said, everything else about the song I think is mixed great. The intro, the verses, and then yeah, the outro is fantastic. I mean, you have, I think it's the best part of the song for me, like the acoustic little riff. The bass is just like the little bass lines, the little fills are fantastic. I believe it's a slide guitar part that's going on too.
A lot of slide guitar on the record.
Yeah, that's something too I should have mentioned earlier. There was, and I shouldn't have been so surprised because one of the biggest song, Interstate Love Song, has slide, but I'm just still surprised they had that much. But I like slide when it's done great, and I think on this album it was done great.
Definitely kind
Um,
of takes it kind of like a Jimmy Page approach. You can kind of really tell well at least me being a little more maybe like guitar player oriented. Um I feel like a lot of those like Aerosmith and Zeppelin vibes can definitely come out in some songs, but I like that they use it, melodically or even they make it their own.
yeah, and like you were saying, I think lyrically this is the strongest song on the album. It's probably my favorite lyrically. It's maybe the most relatable to, which is why I like it. There's so many great lines. I mean, I literally texted you the other day that I was walking my dog in the morning listening to this album, and he sings in the pre-chorus, "Left my meds on the sink again," and I was like, "Oh shit, I gotta go take my meds when I'm done walking the dog." Um,
Right. And
but
I
I
hear
mean,
that voice in my head sometimes.
yeah, but there's great lyrics. I'm manic as hell, but I'm going strong. And then the chorus is great with the "Don't sleep behind the wheel at the stoplight, can't sleep behind the wheel as you're driving home." Like I think that's fantastic. And even though it is repetitive near like the last chorus, like I still think it's great. I just like I said, the chorus, I wish the production was different, but the rest of the song I think is great. And I'm not someone, I can't overlook production if the song is strong. And this song is strong. There's no doubt about it. So I can kind of look past that a little and still, rate it highly.
Good.
Um, the last song I want to talk about that I won't rate as highly, and then I can get on to the last couple that I really, really like, is Regeneration. That on first listen, when I first heard that song, I'm like, before I even finished the rest of the album, I'm like, this is going to be my least favorite. Um, and maybe even on my first listen, it still was. I like Long Way Home better because I just the lyrics in Regeneration I did not like. There's some lines that
Really?
I'm not even going to mention that I just when I listen to them just kind of creep me out a little bit. And he probably didn't mean them the way that I heard them, but I just didn't like them. And the song has a really like unnerving aspect to it. I don't know how to describe it. Like, but I will say when I gave it a couple more listens, there are parts about it that I didn't like before that I liked better. Like the vocal melody and the verses, I thought was very interesting because it's very rhythmic. I thought at least like definitely different than anything else on the album up to this point. The bass had a really cool kind of like throbbing effect during the verses, and the chorus is kind of what I didn't like, and I still don't love about it. Like just the kind of shouting. The music is okay, just the I don't like the tone of his voice in the chorus and the kind of shouting aspect of it. Kind of the same thing with the bridge, even though I get the lyrics, and I don't mind the message. I just don't necessarily love like the approach.
What do you
But
think the message is? This is like the only song on the album where I'm kind of really lost. I love the song though. Let me kind of contrast you with that. I think it's a creative, cool, immersive rock song with yeah, I mean it stands out from the other songs, but I totally do get the part that yeah, it's a little obnoxious with the distorted vocals. I could totally see that. I definitely see where you're coming from. But what do you think the song's about even?
I don't know. It sounds like it's either about a person or maybe a whole generation, which is why it's called Regeneration. That's kind of like abused. And like, especially in the bridge where they're singing to the fields where the lesser mice go, to the fields where men follow, just gives me like, or to the fields where we all follow, they also sing. It just gives me that feeling of like, maybe he's talking about like people being led like sheep. But then like in the verses specifically, he's like a lot of like talk about like, bread to feed the masses, soup lines. I don't know. I think it is a little abstract, and I couldn't tell you exactly what it's about, which I do like that aspect of it. I like that I can kind of sit and look at the lyrics and think a little bit and ponder them. But there are just some lines in that song that I'm like, just don't like
They're a
like,
little much.
yeah. So it's kind of an annoying song, but there's, like I said, there's element. The bass and the verse vocals, I think, are great. And I think the music in the chorus is really good too. So
Something I will say about um the band that I think kind of helps sell some of these songs is at least for me, I think they have a noticeable groove. Some
yeah, I
bands when they
agree.
play, they just have a swing or something, and I think a big key to their sound is actually their drummer, Eric Kretz. He can be a little bit modest at times, especially on their some of their later records, but he plays really behind the beat, and they just sound huge, but they sound kind of groovy. And I think to me, that's something that I really like, is I can really gain a sense of identity of the each individual members. Kind of like the classic rock licks of Dean, the James Jamerson bass lines of Robert, and then once again just together in unison, all of them, they have that sound. And so for me, I think that's part of also why I really have connected with this album.
Yeah, and I will say, out of all the band members, he was the one that impressed me the least. But there are still some songs where I thought the drumming was cool. And they do have really good groove, and I think it's the bassist. I think is really sometimes what drives the songs, even when
Yeah.
the guitarist is taking a more of a simpler approach. Um, this album does. I do think I like the slower moments a little bit more, the kind of ballad moments. Um, Wonderful is the most ballad song to me on this album. And like I said before, I liked it more in the first couple listens than like the last couple listens that I gave it. And
Really?
only because I think the chorus it gets a little bit on the corny side. I think it starts off great. I think, again, he starts off with a great, opening lyric with if I were to die this morning, which is tragic knowing, yeah, he eventually passed away. But it's like a good hook. It's a really soft kind of sound with the guitars. Um, but like the keyboard noises, like in the um choruses, I thought got a little grating after multiple listens. Um, but as the song develops, I like the guitar parts that come in during the second verse. I think it keeps the song interesting. The bridge is very dramatic, but I think in a good way. I just don't love like the nasal tone of his vocals so much on the chorus, which is probably why on repeated listens the chorus just got a little much for me. That
Okay.
said, there are still things I really liked about the chorus, like the line. I think I spread myself a little too thin. Um, and the little kind of bluegrass slides in the solo too, I think are really cool. So, this is one of the songs I think I recognize. You must have played this before on your acoustic guitar,
Mm-hmm.
because I recognized that the opening line when I heard it, the melody and the vocals. I like that one and Bipolar Bear were two songs that I kind of had a vague recollection of. Um, but it's not my favorite ballad out of them. Um, if I compared that one to Hello, It's Late and A Song for Sleeping, which I don't know if you'd call those ballads, but for slower songs, I think those two are more interesting. Hello, It's Late. It like I I wish it developed a little bit more. Like it starts off really cool with that electric piano, probably that Rhodes piano. Um, fantastic bass line. Verses are like really moody. I love Scott's like restrained vocals.
Great vocal performance on there.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
sells the song.
one of the best on the whole album. It has good like imagery with like sitting on this merry-go-round. The only thing that I think takes away from the song a little bit is that I don't think the chorus is like cookie enough. Like the chorus is the one part that I feel like does not develop as well as other songs on the album.
It's more okay to me. The song doesn't have a chorus; it has more of a hook. So think kind of like a '60s song, would.
But it's not hooky enough is my problem.
Okay, that is fair. But I
But
think for
because
me, it's the build, like
it does have great dynamics. I wrote that on my notes. I said there is a great dynamics between the bridge and the verses, or I'm sorry, the verse and the solo is what I wrote.
Yeah, that's solo. The production
Yeah.
on that solo is
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think that the dynamics there are fantastic, but like the hook's just not like, and the only reason I don't think the song is like, I like the song more than I'm making it sound like is because the verses and intro, those parts are so cool that even though the chorus or the hook, as you call it, is a little lacking for me, I still think the rest of the song is great enough to live up to being a really good song.
Yeah, I think for me,
It's
my
moody.
least
I like
favorite
it.
thing. Yeah, the atmosphere is great. My least favorite part is probably the lyrics. I think the lyrics are a little generic. I do like the merry-go-round line and the way he kind of says it, like sit in, like kind of. I don't know. He kind of says it in a kind of a fun way almost. But I think the lyrics could be a little more interesting. I think the rest of the album all has better lyrics, except "Long Way Home." But
And then the last two songs I want to talk about, the only last two that we haven't really mentioned is because I've been kind of saving them for last, were the two songs that surprised me the most, besides Too Cool Queenie, because that one grew on me, where these two that I'm about to talk about, I kind of liked from the beginning. And then I only liked them even more the more I listened, was Black Again and A Song for Sleeping. A Song for Sleeping, on first listen, I liked it. And I don't think I realized how much I liked it when I heard the album again, especially because it's in between two songs that I don't like as much, Transmissions and A Long Way Home. Song for Sleeping has such a cool vibe, which I know is not the most descriptive way, but like that's the only way I can describe it. Like it has a really cool vibe. Like it's light. The drums are unique. I don't know if they're kind of programmed a little bit, but they're cool. I love the acoustic riffs that come in. Bass is groovy. I think his Scott's vocals are maybe the best on this song, not because he does the most impressive screams or anything like he does in other songs, but because they're restrained and because he's like doing this like chest voice that's not quite falsetto, but you know what I'm talking about. Like it's
that is my favorite version of Scott is when he does
yeah.
that mixed voice where it has the gentleness and the sweetness of like a falsetto, but it still sounds full.
And if you
And
told me he had solo songs that sound like that, I would definitely check out his solo albums.
I wish I could say that. Some of them though, some of them yes, some of them are fantastic, and that's why I do love his solo work. Some of it.
But yeah, I mean, I love the chords they chose for like the pre-chorus and the chorus. I especially love vocalized. Maybe my favorite vocal moment on the album, besides and I know we haven't talked about it too much because there's almost not much to say about it because I love the song so much, but Days of the Week, that's like that vocal everything about that song is like top notch. I mean, Days of the
especially the
Week,
bass work.
the
Oh my god.
bass, the bridge is really cool. Like Days of the Week, the lyrics are really catchy. The whole song is catchy. Like Days of the Week is fantastic. But this song has maybe one of my favorite vocal moments when he sings "While I'm Watching You Grow," especially in the word "grow." I don't know if it's a combination of just the way he sang it and then little extra production that Brendan O'Brien put on his voice, but it's like heavenly. Like it sounds absolutely fantastic.
Right before they go into that soaring falsetto
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Great moment.
The backing vocals, which I don't know if they're his double tracked or if they're one of the band members, those sound
Yeah,
great.
he does all the record vocals.
Yeah, so those sounded good. The slides on the solo is great. But yeah, like Song for Sleeping, and it's because when I was looking at that title, I'm like, oh, okay, it's gonna be ballad. but it's not quite like it's not a lullaby for sure, but it's definitely softer compared to a lot of the other songs on the album. But it's so smooth. It's the smoothest song on the album, and it's probably my third favorite, only behind Black Again, which that is the song I was most surprised with because again, when I heard the chorus, I think I recognized it a little bit from maybe you playing it either just out loud or covering it. Black Again is not a song I should like. It has like three different distinctive parts. It's kind of all over the place at times. And the moods change a lot between the different parts. And the chorus is very dark. That said, I love every part. I think they all fit with one another, and I think they're all very interesting.
Now, okay. So I do remember when I'm not sure if you heard Black Again or if I played it for you. Now I do remember I did play you a song for sleeping, but that's not important. What's important is that you told me that you could not stand that chorus melody.
Yeah,
But
and
this is now your second favorite off the album, and I'll be the first to admit this is also maybe like my second favorite. It's one of my tops for sure. But so let's break it down. Let's go. There's three distinctive parts. Let's start off with the opening riff. For me, one of my favorite riffs, the fuzz octave bass, is a really cool vibe. The drums doing that kind of like that 3/4 swing thing or whatever it is. I think it's just a rocking section. Now, okay. Do you feel the same then? If we both love the song,
yes, I agree with everything you just said. Fantastic opening riff. Love when it comes back in after the first chorus. Great.
especially before the last chorus too, when Scott does those backup vocals. I think it's simple. It's not. He doesn't say too much by doing it, but it kind of brings a little variety in there. Now, the second part being the verse. Now, how do you feel about the verse?
It surprised me by the tone of it. Like we get these like gorgeous piano, which is by far the I think the best usage of keyboards or piano on the whole album. It totally changes like the vibe of the song, but in like a great way. Gives it texture, it gives it nuances that I think without it, the song would be lacking a little bit of. And it's like a little bit like softer, the whole sound. And like it's not as energetic as the opening. So some people might have been let down when they heard the verse, but I was the opposite. I was like, oh, this is such a cool approach.
Great
And
contrast.
yeah, great contrast. And I just, yeah, I mean, it is probably, I think my favorite part of the whole song or one of mine. I will say one of the, cause I love the opening bit, but the verses I think is what really is like the meat of the song.
Agreed. And there's what's kind of nice about it is that not saying complexity makes something better necessarily, but I think they achieved a sort of nice ambiguity of that section where it's not like, oh, C major chord, D major chord. They kind of really made it murky yet quite beautiful. And to me, maybe my favorite part on the album is actually in the second verse. The way he sings the line, hold your breath underwater, know you'll rise to the surface slowly. Think of me as a ship that might hold you, carry you to the shore when you're tired and lonely.
Yeah,
I
it's definitely one of the best
love
lyrics on
that.
the whole album.
Yeah,
Um,
that one's got me knocked out.
and then you get the chorus, which I know when I was younger, I could see why I wouldn't like it. It is a little obnoxious. It's repetitive. I think the guitar part in the background is what I didn't like so much, the way it kind of matched up with like Scott's vocal melody. But now I can appreciate it. Now I think it's catchy, it's hooky, and yeah, it's like the darkest part of the song, especially the lyrics are really dark. You know, she can't eat, she can't sleep, she's not well, she's in hell, but like it's because of that verse, because the verse is a little softer and a little bit more somber in tone, I do think the chorus is more fitting than if you just heard the chorus by itself. So yes, it maybe is a little too repetitive at times, but because you have such dynamics between the three different parts, I actually like really liked it. Even on the first listen, when I gave this whole album the first listen a week ago.
Yeah, I'm glad you love it, and I think something too. You've really been emphasizing the three distinctive parts. I'm thinking about it now. And after the choruses, minus the last chorus, there's a, a pretty energetic kind of swingy drum fill. And then when you go back to that, that really loud, fuzz section, it totally lifts up the song again. And so you get this really dark, kind of repetitive chorus, and then boom, it's that burst of energy, and then that fall again to the dramatic yet, kind of gorgeous verse.
But and the last thing I'll say about it is there's so many things about the song that when you started mentioning that the last bit and you started saying that part after the chorus, I thought you were going to say my favorite part of the song. One of my favorites is when he sings the "As Long as I'm Beside Her," and the way that it has like that really quick change in progression between the chorus and back to the intro. I love that little bit.
Yeah, especially with the tremolo on those guitar chords. Yeah.
It's like because it's kind of like welcoming you from the chorus almost back into the verse really quick before you go back into the intro.
Right,
So
right.
so again, it's almost like a fourth part, but it's so short that it's not really a whole part of the song, but he does it multiple times. So yeah, that's the one nice thing I liked about the album and that song particularly is that there are there are a lot of nuances and there are songs that have details like that in it. Yeah, you have a song that is more straightforward, like Dumb Love or, you know, Hollywood Bitch or maybe even Coma. But then you have songs that have a lot of textures, like Wonderful, like A Song for Sleeping. And then you just have some that are like upbeat and just like cool rock songs like Too Cool Queenie, Days of the Week. So I did enjoy the variety, and I on first listen I don't think I realized how much a variety there was, which is why I was disappointed. But now that I've listened to it enough times, and that's why I do think it's important to give the album multiple listens. Now, if I hate it on first listen, it's going to be harder to change my mind. But I was just slightly disappointed, meaning that I knew if I gave it a couple more listens, I would start to come around to it eventually.
Well, I'm glad you were able to come around to it.
Yeah, still not like you said it's one of your favorite albums of all time. I wouldn't nearly go that far, and just like I know you wouldn't with "You Choose Action Baby," which we talked about last week. But um, I can see why particularly you it's one of your favorites for sure because it has like a lot of the things you like in music within all of the songs.
That actually is true. It's got great chord voicings. It's got a healthy splash of, classic rock. Okay, yeah. I think, all in all, the songwriting's great, and I'm a big sucker for details. Even on the rock songs, there's always something new happening, with each section or whatnot. There's always that, um, there's always is that variety. It's a very, it's an album that covers a lot of ground, and I think it really shows off the creativity of the band. And although, it's always hard to pick a favorite album of the band, this one for me is just the one that I connect with the most. But even then, some days I'm just like, whoa, but Tiny Music is really, really interesting, which I actually would really love to hear your thoughts on that one. But
Future
maybe
episode.
another episode someday.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, I think once we go through enough different artists, I know like I'm gonna want to give you another Hip or another Spoon. You might want to give me another S2P or Elliott Smith. So I'm sure we will get repeat artists. So that's the only reason why I don't think either of us have really gone back to some of these artists again. But I know we both want to. So
Yeah,
um,
so with STP, would you how about this? This is kind of the ultimate test here. If you walked into your local record store and you saw Shangri-La Dee up for sale, good luck with that, but would you snag it?
yes, if it was for like a reasonable price, like a normal price, I think I would. I don't know if I would go out of my way yet and purchase it online, but I think if I was at the record store and I didn't already have my arms full with other records, I could easily see myself buying this one, especially if it could be the cool orange color of the album cover, which I know is the version you have.
Yes. Although my version has the last second of Coma cut off. Fantastic.
Eh, that could be worse,
Really though, it could.
but it could be better because they could have cut off all of Long Way Home, and it would have been better.
Oh. No, they could have just like maybe like took out a verse Or no. What they could have done is just loop the solo, just an extended solo.
There you
That
go.
solo's epic, dude. It does save the song.
Well, I think that'll be it for this week's episode. Tony did kind of mention talking about things in music that he likes, and that's kind of going to be the theme of next week's episode. So stay tuned for that. And then next month hopefully we got some cool episodes that are, being planned right now that we think everyone will enjoy and we'll have fun making. So stay tuned for those. Until then, we hope everyone takes care and you'll be hearing from us soon. Bye-bye.